What's going on here?
I'm figuring out my schedule for the second half of the year, but I'm having a lot of trouble deciding what order I want to go in.
Well, maybe I can help. What do you have in your tool review pile?
Well, I definitely want to look at something Doctor Who related, so that's on the top of my priority list. And then for years I've wanted to look at the XKCD What If book, so that's definitely second. And then there's this indie author, really indie, you probably never heard of him. I've really wanted to talk about it. His name is Ian Dunno. So I've got Who first, What If second, and I Dunno on third.
You want to do what first?
No. Who is first? What is second?
So what's third?
No, what is second?
I don't know.
That's third.
Hold on, let's just take a minute. Why don't you tell me what you're reviewing this week? Maybe focusing on a different problem will help get the wheels turning on the first issue.
Tomorrow.
Why can't you tell me today? Bad renditions of classic comedy bits aside, hello and welcome to the Literary Lair. It's time for another Patreon-sponsored review, and like our last one, this one is covering an Australian property. The patron requested that I look at Tomorrow, When the War Began, but wasn't picky on the specifics. What I mean is that they gave me a choice: the book, the movie, or the television adaptation, and I was flip-flopping for a bit. I couldn't find the TV show on streaming, so that was out. And I tried getting into the book, but I just couldn't connect, so it made the choice pretty easy. Though for all intents and purposes, according to my research, the film adaptation is shockingly faithful, so it's basically the same thing. Oh god, I sound like a lot of lazy people from my high school English classes. If anyone from those classes is watching this video, I'm not talking about you. Truth be told, I'd have ended up using images from the movie anyway in the summary, so this is really just cutting out the middleman. Tomorrow, When the War Began is a young adult invasion book series written by John Marsden, a prolific Australian author who is also a teacher and a principal. The book was released in 1993 and... how can I sum up the plot without going into detail? It's Australian Red Dawn, but not the Josh Peck Red Dawn, the Patrick Swayze Red Dawn. And actually, it kinda fits, given that Australia also has a reason to have an affinity for Wolverines, since a very famous one comes from there. Anyway, there's not much else I have to say before we get into the review, so let's see if this Australian adaptation of a noteworthy Australian written work is as amazing as The Man from Snowy River was. This is Tomorrow, When the War Began. The film starts out with our protagonist, Ellie Linton, filming a video diary, explaining that doing it is her way of working through the trauma that she's experienced. We flash back to a week earlier, where Ellie was busy planning a graduation trip with some of her friends and acquaintances to a remote valley known to the locals as Hell. She goes with her friend Corey and Corey's boyfriend Kevin, Ellie's Greek neighbor Homer, Rick's girl Fiona, ultra-Christian Robin, who is basically Joyce from Dumbing of Age, and Ellie's classmate and crush Lee, whose parents own a local Chinese restaurant. They go down into the wilderness in Ellie's parents' Land Rover and have a great time, with Homer falling in love with Fiona, Ellie getting closer to Lee. A good time was had by all. The only hiccup is noticing a bunch of military planes flying overhead, but the group write that off as a military exercise and don't think much of it at the time. When they start heading home, they notice that the city is oddly deserted, and upon arriving at Ellie's house, they find the place abandoned, phone lines cut, electricity gone, and Ellie's dog dead, chained up near the front of the house. Oh, this is an Australian Red Dawn. It's Australian Walking Dead. I really hope they don't repeat the same mistakes and have Australian Negan kill Lee. In quick succession, they head to Homer's and Kevin's, finding both places abandoned as well, though being able to save Kevin's dog. They decide to split up, with the others going to their homes, while Ellie, Corey, and Kevin go into town to investigate, seeing lights on at the hospital and the fairgrounds. They find a large military installation at the fairgrounds and see that the populace is being kept prisoner by a foreign army who aren't hesitant to kill anyone uncooperative. Ellie is accidentally spotted and they run away, with Kevin abandoning the two girls to save his own sorry skin, otherwise known as the Arnold Rimmer maneuver. They escape back to Corey's house where Homer and Fiona are waiting. You see, during their weekend trip, Australia was invaded on several ports by the Coalition, a group of Asian military powers who believe that Australia should share their space and resources with the rest of them, and because Australia said no, they decided to take it by force. The group's first priority is simply staying alive and locating the rest of their number, with Robin and Lee still missing. A helicopter spots their activity in the house, and the place is destroyed by bombs. Ellie and Homer sneak back into town to do recon and head to Robin's house, finding Robin, who had snuck back for supplies to help in keeping Lee in good health. Lee had went in to investigate his parents' restaurant, and he was spotted getting shot. Thankfully, Lee's dentist was nearby and saw what happened, offering his medical services to treat the wound. They asked Dr. Clements to stick around, but he's focusing on numero uno, and heads off, but not before warning the kids not to be heroes. He tells them that a lot of other people tried that, attempting to destroy the bridge that the Coalition forces are using to transport supplies, and all they got was killed for their troubles. Lee can't walk, so they have to commandeer some sort of vehicle. But the only vehicles available are noisy and would cause them to be caught immediately, which inspires them to instead pick a large, nigh invincible construction vehicle. They load Lee into the bucket of a backhoe and speed off, getting into a chase with armed Coalition dune buggies, but thanks to quick thinking by Ellie and Robin, they all escape with their lives and all converge once more, planning on heading back to Hell to wait the whole thing out. At this point, tensions are high and Ellie has killed people during their escapes, not to mention that the group are getting on each other's nerves because their priorities are still on their own personal survival plans. On the way back, they notice a house far away from the action and find it inhabited by Chris Lang, a local stoner and classmate of the group's, whose parents were away before the attack and due to his intoxicated state, didn't notice that his country had been taken over. Although, as silly as that sounds, it sounds like a pretty awesome plot for a Cheech and Chong movie. Ellie and Lee start to get close, and Lee kisses Ellie, but she freaks out and runs off, finding Chris, who was supposed to be on lookout, asleep at his post and rips into him, eventually threatening him with her rifle.
Whoa. Shoot me!
What are you doing?
Go on, Chris, shoot me!
I don't want to shoot you.
Oh, what, you can't kill me while I'm awake?
Jeez, Ellie, it was an accident. I'm sorry.
Bullshit, you're sorry!
The rest of the group calm her down and they head back to Hell, where Ellie takes a long nap, and when she wakes up, she's extremely sorry about what she did to Chris. There's also a cute bit here, where Corey is reading a book and comments that the book is better than the movie, leading Ellie to comment that books usually are. Though that's not always true. Some books are improved by the film, and in the case of Tomorrow When the War Began, this is a pretty damn good movie, and really faithful to the source. Lee tries to get Ellie to talk about the kiss, but she's still not in the right headspace to do so. Despite their differences, the teens can all agree on one thing. They can't sit idly by and let their country be taken over. Although I do find it a little bit funny that they talk about saving the country they were born in from foreign invaders, despite them all seemingly being descended from foreign invaders. At least I think so. I'm not certain, but none of them appear to be Aboriginal, so they're all colonists. Though to be clear, I'd be pointing this out in an American movie as well. It's just something funny I noticed. They intercept a radio transmission that tells them all the stuff I already told you guys about the invasion. I figured it was easier to explain it at the top and rather than wait, and they make a plan to destroy a key bridge near town to slow the invasion. Their plan is to steal a gasoline, or as the Brits and Aussies call it, a petrol tanker, drive it under the bridge and ignite it, which will take the entire bridge down and make it so that the coalition can't move forces and supplies into their town. They break into teams. Ellie and Fiona steal the tanker, with Fiona getting to do some mild vandalism to get the keys. Lee and Homer have to scare a bunch of cows, making them stampede the bridge so that the soldiers have to flee, and Chris and Robin keep watch. While waiting in the tanker, Fiona wants to have a heart-to-heart about her feelings about Homer, and turns their radio off so that they can't be warned when a group of coalition forces sneak up on the tanker. They're forced to accelerate the plan, but Ellie and Fiona are surrounded and can't escape, especially not because they both forgot to bring a lighter with them to ignite the fuse. The soldiers fire on them, but breaking her ultra-Christian no-killing rule, Robin takes the rifle from Chris and takes out the soldiers, with Chris redeeming himself by using his own lighter to take out the bridge. Unfortunately, during the escape, a soldier gets a good shot off on Corey, who can't survive without proper medical treatment. Kevin, evolving from the abject coward with a longer yellow streak than a stampede of diuretic camels, volunteers to take her to a hospital regardless of the risk of being killed or imprisoned. They have a tearful goodbye and Ellie cries in Lee's arms. The movie ends with Ellie finishing off her video diary by explaining that they went back to hell to regroup, and they haven't been found yet, and they're not planning on going gentle into that good night. They're not stopping till either they're dead or their country is saved. And that was Tomorrow When the War Began, a really good movie. I tend to have luck with the Patreon-sponsored Literary Lair episodes. They've always ended up being good. Haven't been steered wrong yet. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie, and it makes me curious to give the book another chance. Maybe now that I know the story, I can break into it a little easier. I found it really easy to like all the characters. They all had realistic arcs. They don't become heroes immediately. They spend half the movie freaking out and fighting amongst themselves, which is, being generous, realistically what most teenagers would do in that situation. They're thrust into it, and they only really embrace the heroics when they themselves are put through the ringer so much that there's nothing else left to do. Like a personal hero of mine, Hawkeye Pierce, once said,
"You know what a hero is? 99 times out of 100, he's somebody who's tired enough and cold enough and hungry enough not to give a damn. I don't give a damn."
I'm making a lot of MASH references lately. I gotta get new references. In addition, while I didn't really read the novel in depth, it appears to be a very faithful adaptation, and even adapts the premise of the book being autobiographical from the point of view of Ellie, and translates it into a video diary instead of a regular diary. They could have 86'd the framing device altogether, but I'm happy that they kept it because it gives the story a unique flair. Obviously, there's more to the story than just Australian Red Dawn, and I had a great time watching it. I did have some issues with sound balance, and I needed to turn on closed captions because the explosions and gunshots were too loud, but other than that, it was awesome. Plus, that animation during the end credits is kick-ass. The actors are good, and while none of them were breathtakingly good, and none of them were Kirk Douglas, they did play the parts they were given extremely well, and they were able to balance the dour seriousness with the few moments of comedy and levity. And the cinematography was really good, mainly in the beginning when they were exploring hell, but there were some interesting directorial choices made later on as well. Overall, Tomorrow When the War Began is an amazing film that I highly recommend, and if the original novel and the television series are anywhere near the quality of this, which I imagine they are, I highly recommend those as well. Coming up, since Avengers Endgame comes out soon, we're going to take a look at the most maligned entry in the Avengers series. And no, it's not the Ralph Fiennes one. See you next time. Yes, Chicago. That's my kind of town, Chicago is. It's my kind of town, Chicago is. My kind of town, Chicago is. My kind of people too. People who smile at you, and when you're in Chicago is. Okay, Chicago. I think I got a handle on the accent. Mostly. I probably have enough of a handle that it sounds like it did the last time I did the accent, so I think we're good. Chicago.